den andra fattade vi nog inte riktigt. Men eftersom vi bara har en så passar väl inte det problemet in i vår...
Well, I guess it could still be a problem. It's when you let's say you have a study on motivation. Most of you guys have that, right? Then when you are going to find the person for the study, it's probably a person who is motivated for their sport or whatever you want to investigate, because people who are not motivated for their sport might not be interested in talking about it. So there's a chance that you will be randomly selecting persons that are very motivated for the sport.
Jag tänkte att det var tredje ungefär så. Att det blir lite partiskt allting, för att man väljer sådana som man vet typ vad man ska få försvara redan.
Det är inte skillnaden att trean du väljer som säger, du väljer för att du vill ha någon form av försvarriktad. Medan tvåan handlar mer om att du vill ha mer information.
Number 2 is asking people to volunteer, and then the people who volunteer might not be the best representative of the population. Yeah. And number 3 is when you are not asking people to volunteer, but still select a sample that's not representative of the population. Yeah, go on.
Ja, vi gör ju inte ett random sample, så att det misstaget gör vi inte. Sen kan det ju vara tvärtom. Att man kanske borde göra random sample. Beroende på vad man har för.
I agree.
Samma sak, men jag vet inte exakt vad man har för fråga, men det hade ju troligtvis varit bättre att ha fler deltagare.
We'll get back to that with the second group. So we can probably argue that we're doing all the mistakes that the book mentions. How many of these mistakes do you think are fair? I mean, can we dismiss some of them because they don't really apply or something like that?
First one, maybe?
The first one is...
I mean, if you are going to make an interview with a person, I mean, there must be a good thing that you already know the person, because maybe the person feels more safe. And it can also be bad, because then, so you chose this person because you already know this person's opinions and you want to use it in your project.
I agree. The first one is something that you have to consider when you're doing qualitative study. I mean, always take into account whether you know a person or not and what are the dangers to that. But I'm actually thinking that the 4 others are a bit too quantitative, I would argue. And again, you can see how it works in this book. It says mistakes made in selecting a sample, determining sample size, and then goes on to blah blah percentages and whatnot, and 5,000 and 50,000. It talks about that. And then down here, there's kind of an addition to the real research, or whatever you choose to call it. And then they mention case study or ethnographic sampling. And as you can see here, for example, your choice of case should rarely be random. So the complete opposite of what we do in quantitative research. And they kind of fail to mention that when they're talking about research design and sampling in general. But these are the questions that you need to consider when finding an interview person. You probably already did that. But how many cases? Is this a typical case? Am I looking for extremes or important cases? And can I get access to the sample? So those are different questions that you are asking yourself compared to when you want to do quantitative research. But I think that brings us well into the next question. How many cases are required? And that was the second group who were answering that. What do you guys think?
We were talking about it depends on your purpose of your study, how many you need.
Mm-hmm.
And Alexandra, what did you say something about?
Det beror, ja, i vårt fall så är ju tiden rätt begränsad. Man vill ha så många som möjligt, men för vårt till exempel examensarbetet så är tiden ganska begränsad för att hinna med.
I completely agree. It's always a way-in of how well do you want to do the study and how much time do you have for it.
Det är väl lite som vi pratade om förra lektionen också, där om man ska göra en kvalitativ transkribering tar ju väldigt lång tid också. Så väljer man att göra 10 pers i en kvalitativ så tar det ju väldigt lång tid. Och då ska ju tiden finnas. Sen är det alltid bättre ju fler du har. Men tiden finns väl inte alltid till.
Yeah, I agree again. What I was looking for, I mean, I completely agree with your points, but you're not becoming very specific on how many participants you want in a good study. Ideally, I mean, if you want to investigate motivation in elite athletes, we'll interview every elite athlete there is, and then we'll have a really good set of data that we can analyze on. But since there's so many elite athletes, we probably won't have time for that. So, usually, the rule of thumb is that you want so many participants that if you interview one more, then it won't add any new information to the data you already have. So they'll be saying the same things over again with motivation, and I think it's fun, and I like to feel important, blah blah. And you already heard that. So when you're at that point, then it's probably a good point to stop. But we'll stick with the one case, and hopefully it's one of these two. Oops, hang on. Oh, okay, I can do that. Either a typical case where you can kind of use the results from that case and apply it to other cases, or some sort of extreme or important case that will demonstrate or test or investigate a particular theorem. So I hope you considered that when you chose your informant. All right. I thought that worked a little better than the first time, so I'll give you guys one more chance to, hang on, here we are, to really excel. So, we already did this. Here we are. Can we use, when you guys are doing your qualitative interviews, are there any possibilities of doing triangulation? And to answer that, I think we first need to define triangulation. Any suggestions? I think, don't write that in your assignment, but I think the term is derived from navigation, where you kind of have, I mean, if you want to decide your distance to a particular point, that's pretty hard just by looking at it. But if you then choose another point and look at that particular point, then you can calculate the distance by calculating the angle and the distance between these 2 points. So very mathematical. But the idea is the same, that we have this phenomenon that we want to look at, and if we want the best view on that, description of it, or investigation of it, then we should approach it from more than one side. So, for instance, it could be a qualitative data collection and a quantitative data collection for a particular phenomenon. I guess you could call that similar to what we did in the research article that we're going to get back to. But for your study, what are the possibilities for triangulation, if there are any? So I'll give you guys 5 minutes to discuss that, and we'll take it in all together afterwards. Yeah? And if you're looking for it in the book, there's something about it on page 108.